are on the way. He's John Browne. He's a senior market strategist at Euro-Pacific Capital. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Liz.
John, I also should tell the viewer that you were a member of British Parliament and an associate of Margaret Thatcher.
Yes, under the Blessed Margaret.
Under the Blessed St. Margaret Thatcher. So, John, what do you make of all this?
Well, of course it will mean tax hikes down the road, but that's paid by relatively few people. Under 50% of Americans have to pay tax. But the real bill is going to be paid in the debt of America, greatly increased debt, and of course in inflation down the road, massive inflation, and of course in a lower standard of living.
Right.
And that's paid by every American citizen and their children.
What we're talking about is the $7 trillion deficit. I mean, what we're seeing this year is 4 times last year. $7 trillion equates to the GDP of, Britain, of France, of Germany, And so what are we talking about here? Do you think that the president can buy his way out of recession and buy his way to economic growth?
Well, of course it'll appear so. Because to start with, spending a lot of money, even if you have to borrow it to spend it, like when you go shopping, it feels great. I've suddenly got a lot of money, but it's all on my credit card, and I've got nothing in the bank. So the day of reckoning will come, and of course, to start with, it'll feel good, and then it'll feel dreadful. And what you're here now, I think we're heading for, is hyper-stagflation. In other words, hyperinflation financially, and stagflation and stagnation economically, and that's the worst of both worlds.
What are we talking? I mean, $1 trillion is 1,000 billion.
Yeah,
right?
And a billion minutes ago, Jesus Christ was alive, and $1 trillion is 1,000 times that.
So how many hours would it take somebody to count $1 trillion? Do you think?
It would take 41,000 years.
41,000 years to count $1 trillion in
yes,
a warehouse.
a dollar at a time. $1 every second.
I mean, it's enough to block out the sun, just $1 trillion. But, here's what I'm wondering. I mean, when you think about these massive deficits and where we are right now, the question is, the government is using these really rosy GDP numbers to get at this number, right? The 3.6 trillion. I mean, it could be even higher, right?
Yes. And the GDP could be a lot less. The GDP is shrinking now at 6.1%, and it could go on shrinking, because what worries me most is the unemployment. Because if people are not only unemployed but worried about that they're going to be unemployed, if unemployment is rising, then they spend less and less. They hoard cash. And the unemployment figure today is 8.7%. But if you include the associated people, in other words, people who haven't got so fed up with claiming unemployment they didn't claim for 4 weeks, and people that have accepted part-time employment because they just can't get a full-time job, it's 15.2%.
Now, John, do you think either John McCain or President Obama would have won the election last year, telling the American people the truth that they were going to spend $3.6 trillion?
I don't think so. I mean, they should have. It's awful when you say if you tell the truth, you're not going to win. But the sad truth is that a politician that shows the real harsh truth is unlikely to win until people are really suffering. Once people are really suffering, they start to accept the truth, like Winston Churchill at the beginning of the war. I can offer you nothing but tears, sweat, and toil. He told the truth, but people knew there was a real threat then. They said, OK, we'll have you because you're going to win.
Final question. Who's telling the truth, do you think, about the deficit and its effect on the economy in Congress and the government now?
I think very few people really are facing people with the truth because it's so horrible. I mean, the deficit is so huge, it's rising. I mean, since the 20th of January, the government spent at the rate of $40 billion each day.
Since the president took office, spending is $40 billion a day.
Yeah, okay. And someone's got to pay that back.
John, we love having you on the show. We want to have you back. You're always insightful, so brilliant.